I knew something was wrong the moment my son whispered, "Don't tell the neighbors you're my mother." He said it quickly, barely moving his lips, like he was afraid someone might hear, as if I were a secret, a blemish on the image he had carefully constructed. I didn't ask him why. I didn't ask anything at all. I just smiled politely at the man in golf shorts who was watering his perfect lawn and waved like I was supposed to, like a visitor, like a stranger. It had been a long flight from Oregon to Connecticut, 2 planes and 1 bumpy taxi ride. I'd brought a small suitcase and a tin of my raspberry scones, the kind Daniel used to devour when he was a boy. I was stiff from the trip, my knees aching with every step. But I didn't complain. I never have. Not when I worked double shifts at the clinic, not when I paid for his college, not when I signed the papers for the house he now led me into, like I was some casual acquaintance. "Take your shoes off here," he said. "Carla just had the floors polished." I bent, slowly, unzipping my walking shoes. The entryway gleamed, expensive tile, an abstract painting I didn't recognize, and no place to put my coat. I held it in my hands. Carla came in from the kitchen with a wine glass in one hand and her phone in the other. "Marianne, welcome," she said, giving me a smile that barely touched her eyes. "We weren't sure which flight you were on." "I texted yesterday," I said. "Right," she nodded, already turning back into the kitchen. "Well, we've got a full house this weekend. Neighborhood social tonight. Hope that's okay." Daniel took my coat wordlessly and hung it in a narrow closet next to the door. Not the hall closet. That one was full of designer jackets and polished shoes. The kind you buy to match the kind of life you want people to think you have. I walked into the living room. It was beautiful, I'll give them that. Neutral colors, sharp corners, everything curated like a magazine spread. Not a single picture of Daniel as a boy. Not one photograph with me in it. On the fireplace mantel were 4 frames: Carla's parents in Rome, Carla's sister in Manhattan, Carla's kids from her first marriage. Not even the new baby had a photo with Daniel. Only posed shots, nothing warm. "Where should I put this?" I held up the tin of scones. "Oh, just leave it on the counter," Carla said, distracted. "We're doing gluten-free right now, but the kids might want some." The kids, 12 and 9 from Carla's previous marriage, Daniel's stepchildren. They peeked in, muttered hellos, and ran upstairs. They didn't know me, had never spoken to me on the phone. And my own granddaughter, the baby, was asleep in some sleek white bassinet that looked more like a gadget than a crib. "We'll show you to the guest room," Daniel said. "Not your room, not your home. Just a place to sleep." He led me down the hallway, past a door with "private office" stenciled on it in tiny letters, like I was in some kind of professional space. The guest room was clean, sparse, and cold. It had no books, no chair, just a bed and a small suitcase stand, like a hotel. On the nightstand sat a small card. "Welcome guests. Wi-Fi password. Thornhouse 1. Thornhouse. It was a joke. My last name was Cross. "I'll unpack later," I said, sitting slowly on the edge of the bed. My legs needed a break. Daniel hovered for a moment, then said, "Just try to be relaxed tonight. It's mostly Carla's circle, you know. Doctors, architects, that crowd." "Of course," I said. "What I meant was, I understand I'm not supposed to speak too much, not supposed to say who I am. I'm just window dressing." He left the room, closing the door gently behind him. I stayed sitting there, looking at the blank white walls. Then I opened my purse and checked for the envelope. Still there. The original deed. Because Daniel couldn't get a mortgage on his own, he'd needed me. My name was still on the ownership. Legally, this house was mine as much as his. In fact, more so. I'd paid the down payment in full. $240,000 from my savings, the money I'd built up over decades. He said it was just a formality. Just help me start, Mom. It's our family's future. I believed him. I always believed him. I pressed the envelope flat in my lap, ran my hand over the top. Then I opened the flap and pulled out the document, slowly, like it might burn me, and I took a photo. Then I slid the deed back in and zipped the purse closed. Tomorrow, I would go for a walk. Just to clear my head, I would say. I would take my time. And I would find someone who could help me remember how ownership really works. The next morning, the house was already alive with activity before I made it to the kitchen. Carla was doing something with fruit and yogurt in a tall blender, while Daniel stood by the refrigerator scrolling through his phone. Neither of them looked up when I entered. "Morning," I said, not too loud, not too soft. "Morning," Daniel replied automatically, eyes still on the screen. I walked to the counter and poured myself a cup of coffee from the machine. It was one of those sleek, modern types that looked like it required a license to operate. The coffee was thin and bitter, but I didn't complain. I sat quietly at the breakfast bar and watched. "We're heading out soon," Carla said without turning. "Farmer's market, and then the park with the kids." "That sounds nice," I replied. "Maybe I'll take a walk around the neighborhood, stretch my legs." Daniel finally looked up. "You're sure you're okay with that? It's a pretty upscale area, just don't talk to anyone too long, okay?" I tilted my head slightly. "Why would I?" "No reason," he said quickly. "Just, you know, people here can be particular." I nodded, pretending not to notice the way Carla glanced at him sharply. Like maybe he'd said too much. After they left, I stood alone in the silent kitchen. The counters gleamed. The fridge hummed. The baby monitor blinked softly on the table. I picked up my coffee and walked through the rooms. I'd never been here before. Never invited. When Daniel bought the house a year ago, I was recovering from a fall and couldn't travel. And after that, he always had reasons. Too busy. Too much going on. Carla wasn't feeling well. The house wasn't ready. Now that I was finally here, I saw what ready meant. It meant perfect, pristine, controlled. It meant there was no room for me. In the hallway, I stopped in front of a series of black and white photos. Architectural shots, dramatic angles of bridges, skyline views, but no family photos, not even of the baby. I opened the door to the laundry room. Inside, stacked appliances buzzed quietly. Next to them stood a tall cabinet. I tried the handle, unlocked. Inside were files, envelopes, household paperwork. I spotted a familiar beige folder, one I recognized from the day Daniel had begged me to co-sign. I pulled it out. There, right on top, was the closing summary. Mortgage documents, the legal ownership statement. My name printed in full, Mary Ann Cross. Below that, his name, in smaller font. The second party. I slid the folder back into place. I wasn't looking for confirmation. I already had it. But something in me wanted to see it again, to remind myself that I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't being petty or dramatic. I had every right to be in this house. More than Carla. More than anyone. Later that afternoon, Carla returned with a canvas bag full of heirloom tomatoes and artisanal bread. "We're having bruschetta for dinner," she announced, like it was an invitation to a gala. "Hope you don't mind." "Sounds lovely," I said. "Do you need help?" She paused, like the question confused her. "Oh, no, it's all under control." I watched her slice tomatoes with surgical precision, every move deliberate. Everything in this house had an invisible label on it: curated, measured, approved. After dinner, they invited a couple over from across the street, James and Lydia Duval. He worked in finance. She was on some community board. They brought a bottle of white wine and complimented the marble countertops and the fireplace. "And this is Mary Ann," Carla said with a quick smile. "Daniel's family friend." Family friend. I felt it like a needle under the ribs. Quick, sharp, casual, but I didn't flinch. I smiled and offered Lydia a glass of wine. Let the word hang in the air. Let it settle into their impression of me like wallpaper glue. "So nice to meet you," Lydia said. "You're staying for long?" "Just a few days," I replied. "It's always nice to visit places you've invested in." Her brows lifted slightly. "Oh, are you in real estate?" "You could say that," I said. "I helped acquire this property." Daniel coughed. Carla's hand stilled on the tomato bowl. Lydia laughed politely, clearly unsure if I was joking. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the deed photo open on my phone. I stared at my name. Not because I didn't remember it, but because I wanted to hold on to it like armor. I remembered when Daniel called, desperate and eager. "This is the one, Mom. This house. It's perfect. We just need a little help for the down payment, and the bank wants someone with better equity. It's only on paper, just until I refinance." I said yes without hesitation. I always did. I sold bonds I'd been saving since my late husband passed. Took a hit on the taxes. I told myself it was worth it. I was building something for the next generation. But now, sitting in this pristine guest room, listening to my own son laugh downstairs with people who thought I was just a friend, I realized I hadn't built anything. I had just rented love. On a very short lease. The next morning, Carla greeted me with a schedule. "We'll be out most of the day. Soccer for Nathan, then a baby sensory class," she said, placing a neat list on the kitchen table like she was managing a guest at a retreat. "You're welcome to stay and relax." Relax. That meant stay out of the way. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Daniel added, "There's food in the fridge if you're hungry. Just help yourself." As if I hadn't cooked every meal of his childhood from scratch. As if I didn't know how to feed myself. I nodded. "Of course. You two go enjoy yourselves." They left in a flurry of baby bags, strollers, and choreographed urgency. The door clicked shut, and silence fell over the house like a heavy curtain. I stood in the kitchen for a while, holding my coffee. Then I opened the refrigerator. It was full of green juices, containers labeled with calorie counts, pre-cut vegetables, and protein bars. Nothing that resembled food to me. Nothing warm. Nothing familiar. I closed the fridge and walked back into the living room. I tried to feel like I belonged here. I sat on the sofa, picked up a glossy magazine, flipped through 3 pages, and set it back down. That's when I noticed it. A small gallery wall near the staircase, 6 framed photos in a perfect grid. Carla's family, of course. Her parents on a sailboat. Her children at a beach. Even the baby in a sepia-toned professional shoot. No photo of Daniel, no photo of me, nothing to suggest he'd ever had a life before this one. I wandered upstairs. Slowly. My knees creaked, but I took my time. At the top, a long hallway stretched out, doors closed neatly on both sides. I knew which room was the baby's. I could hear the soft musical hum of a white noise machine. Another door was open slightly. Daniel's office. I paused. The door creaked as I pushed it wider. A clean desk, 2 monitors, a framed diploma from Wharton, and on the shelf, awards for insurance sales. Not a single personal photograph. But in the corner, tucked into the bookshelf, was something familiar, a small wooden box, the one I'd given him after his father died. I walked over and opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Daniel as a child, grinning with a missing tooth, and beneath it, a folded note. I recognized my handwriting. Never forget who you are, and never forget who stood with you when no one else did. Mom. He had kept it. Tears stung, sudden and sharp. I closed the box gently and placed it back. I walked downstairs and out into the backyard. The grass was clipped too short, the patio furniture too white. A sandbox sat untouched in a far corner, still wrapped in its shipping plastic. They were building a life that didn't include the mess of children, the softness of memory, the reality of family. Just then, the sliding door opened behind me. Daniel stepped out. "Oh, you're out here." "Beautiful yard," I said. He looked around like he hadn't noticed it before. "Yeah, I guess it's nice." We stood in silence for a moment. Then I said it. "I saw the pictures, inside." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Carla has a certain style. I noticed. It's efficient." "Mom?" He hesitated. "It's not that we don't appreciate everything you've done. You've been generous, always. But this house is... We've worked hard for this. It's part of a certain life. You understand, right?" I turned slowly to look at him. "You mean the kind of life where people don't have mothers who wear old cardigans and bake scones?" "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It's not." He looked away, out over the empty sandbox. "Carla's parents are coming next week. We're throwing a small brunch. It's more her family's style." I waited. "I just think, maybe it's best if you don't mention the deed." I hadn't planned to. He turned back to me. "Really?" "Of course. I wouldn't want to ruin the illusion." There was a pause, a long, empty one. Then he said it, the sentence that landed like a stone at the bottom of a dry well. "You know how people judge. You wouldn't want anyone thinking I didn't earn this house." And that was it. The truth finally, with no ribbon. I looked at my son, grown, polished, polite, and entirely unaware of the weight of his words. "I never wanted credit, Daniel," I said quietly. "I wanted connection." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's just complicated." "No," I said. "It's very simple." I went back inside, leaving him there on the patio, standing in the perfect yard he didn't want to share with the imperfect woman who raised him. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay on the guest bed, hands folded over my stomach, and stared at the ceiling. I could hear the distant hum of a dishwasher, the occasional creak of pipes, and the rustle of wind against expensive glass. I thought of my own mother, who never had money to give me, but gave me everything else. Her voice, her strength, her stubborn insistence that people deserve to be seen, not hidden. And in that quiet house, I decided I wouldn't be hidden anymore. They dressed me up like I was a problem to be solved. Carla came into the guest room just after 5, holding a pale cardigan and a string of faux pearls. "I thought you might want to wear something lighter," she said, like it was a suggestion. But it wasn't. I looked at the soft beige sweater, the kind that disappeared into the background. "I brought my navy dress," I said. Carla smiled tightly. "It's just that tonight's crowd is a little formal. You'll feel more comfortable in this." I took it without argument. Let her think she was winning something. Downstairs, the dining room table had been extended. Glasses sparkled, napkins folded like swans. Music played softly from invisible speakers. The whole house smelled like rosemary and citrus. Not a single dish was homemade. It was all catered, labeled, precise. Daniel emerged from the office in a button-down shirt the color of dust and kissed Carla on the cheek. "Everything looks perfect," he murmured. She beamed. Then she turned to me. "So, just one little thing. When people ask, just say you're an old family friend visiting from Oregon. Not that we're ashamed, of course," she added quickly. "It's just simpler that way." I stared at her. "Simpler?" "You know," Daniel chimed in, "Carla's family has a certain dynamic with appearances. This neighborhood is full of very curated social circles. People make assumptions." "And what would they assume exactly?" I asked. "That your mother flew across the country to crash your party?" He gave a short laugh. "Don't be like that, Mom." I wasn't being like anything. I was just seeing it all clearly now. The doorbell rang. Carla jumped slightly, then smoothed her hair. "Okay, showtime." One by one, the neighbors trickled in. Men in pastel sweaters, women in tasteful heels, all of them with the same glossy smile. They brought artisanal candles, wine from local vineyards, compliments about the countertops. "And who's this lovely lady?" one of the women asked, gesturing toward me. Carla stepped in quickly. "This is Mary Ann. She's a longtime family friend. She knew Daniel back when he was little." "Oh, how sweet," the woman said. "You're practically an aunt." "Aunt Mary," Carla said with a little laugh. "Exactly." I nodded, smiled, took a sip of wine I didn't like, and listened to them talk about gym memberships, school districts, and boat clubs. Daniel moved among the guests like a trained host, laughing just enough, listening just enough, bragging only when invited. Carla watched him like a coach from the sidelines. The whole thing felt like a stage play, and I was just a prop. At one point, I excused myself to use the bathroom and stopped by the kitchen to refill my glass. Daniel followed me in. "You're doing great," he said quietly. "Thanks for playing along." "Is that what I'm doing?" I asked. "Playing?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know it's weird, but you know how important this is to Carla. She grew up around money. Reputation means something in her world." "And what about your world, Daniel?" He hesitated. "This is my world now." I nodded slowly. "Understood." When I returned to the dining room, they were talking about house values, how much their properties had appreciated. Someone mentioned the market rate of the homes on the east side. "Oh, but this house?" Carla said brightly. "We got it at just the right moment, before the area spiked. It was a smart move." "Good timing," one of the guests agreed. I sat down quietly and listened. Daniel said nothing about who made the purchase possible, who paid the down payment, who co-signed the mortgage. It didn't fit the narrative. I wasn't part of the story they were telling about themselves. Later, when dessert was served, tiny lemon tarts in fragile glass cups, I caught Daniel's eye across the table. For a second, he looked like a boy again, nervous, uncertain, waiting to see if I'd embarrass him. I held his gaze and smiled. Not kindly, not unkindly, just enough to remind him I wasn't forgotten. I was quiet, but not erased. When the guests finally left, one of the men patted Daniel on the shoulder. "Lovely evening, and what a charming aunt you have." "So gracious." "Thanks," Daniel said. "She is." I went upstairs before he could say more, slipped out of the cardigan, took off the pearls. Back in my nightgown, I opened my phone again, looked at the photo of the deed, my name, his name, the value. I stared at it for a long time, then clicked on share and sent it to my lawyer's private email. Not with a message. Not yet. Just insurance. Just in case this little play of theirs ever needed a rewrite. The house was dark, but not quiet. Somewhere in the walls, the plumbing sighed. The refrigerator clicked in its sleep. A motion sensor light blinked faintly in the hallway. I lay on the guest bed with my hands folded over the blanket, staring at the ceiling, where a shadow of the ceiling fan passed back and forth like a slow pendulum. I couldn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired. I was. My feet ached from standing too long in shoes meant for show, not comfort. My back ached from sitting too straight for too many hours. My jaw ached from all the smiling. No, it wasn't pain that kept me awake. It was the quiet realization that something inside me had shifted. I remembered a time, not so long ago, though it feels like another life, when Daniel was small enough to sleep curled against me on the couch. He used to run to the door when I came home from work, arms outstretched, face lit up. There were no swans folded from napkins back then. No reputation to protect. Only the two of us in a small apartment with secondhand furniture and mismatched plates, eating dinner on the floor because we didn't have a table yet. And he was proud of me then. He used to tell people, cashiers, neighbors, the school secretary, "That's my mom. She's a nurse. She helps people." Now I was a family friend, an aunt, a liability. I turned to my side, trying not to make the bed creak. Outside the window, a wind had picked up. The neat rows of hedges swayed slightly under the moonlight. Somewhere down the block, a motion-triggered floodlight came on. In that pale glow, I saw something I hadn't noticed earlier, a small plaque by the edge of the lawn. I sat up, peering through the slats of the blinds. The Thorne residence, engraved in brushed metal, anchored into the ground with pride. It wasn't even his full last name, just Thorne, shorter, crisper, easier to say in introductions. Daniel Cross had been shortened, polished, and sanded down until he fit better into cocktail conversations. It was almost funny. Almost. I reached for the drawer of the nightstand. Inside was a hotel-style notepad and pen. I pulled it out and wrote, in small, steady letters, "It's not bitterness. It's math." Then I drew a line down the middle of the page. On one side, money sent, years worked, hours given, meals made, papers signed. On the other, phone calls received, invitations offered, thanks spoken. The left side was full. The right side had nothing but air. I folded the page, tucked it into my wallet behind my driver's license, and turned off the lamp. But I still couldn't sleep. I thought about the conversation we hadn't had. The one where Daniel might have looked me in the eye and said, "I'm sorry. I forgot where I came from. I forgot who stood with me." But that conversation wouldn't happen. Not because he was cruel. No, he wasn't. Daniel had simply grown comfortable. Comfortable with the benefits of my presence and the invisibility of my identity. Comfortable accepting my sacrifices without ever questioning what they cost me. Comfortable not having to thank me, not having to remember. And I'd allowed it. For years, I let myself believe that love, even lopsided love, was enough. But I was tired now. Not just in my bones, but deeper, in the parts of me that had carried hope for too long without rest. I'd given him this house. I'd watched him host his new life in it. I'd heard the careful omissions, the revised introductions, the tidy edits to history. I'd smiled through all of it. But now I was awake, fully awake, and I couldn't unsee it. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood slowly, walked to the closet where my suitcase sat, and opened the small front pocket. The envelope was still there. I took it out again, unfolded the deed, and stared at the date. October 17th, the day we closed on the house, the day I wired the money, the day I bought him the future he didn't want to share with me. And then I noticed something I'd forgotten. The deed wasn't just a name, it wasn't just ownership. It included a clause, a line added by my lawyer, at my request. No changes in ownership, refinancing, or sale may be executed without written consent of the primary deed holder, Marianne Cross. He couldn't even sell this house without my approval. And suddenly, I felt calm. Not vindictive, not angry, just clear. There would be no shouting, no letters, no drama. Just the slow, steady turning of the wheel back into my hands. It was still my house, and he had forgotten what that meant. By morning, I had made a decision. Not loud, not theatrical, just quiet and final, like a door closing with a soft click. The house was empty again. Daniel and Carla had taken the baby to a music development session. The older kids were at school. I stood in the kitchen, still in my robe, drinking coffee that tasted like cardboard and planning my steps. First, confirm the document. The original, not just the copy in my purse. I knew where it was. I had seen the beige folder in the cabinet in the laundry room, tucked between home warranties and appliance manuals. At the time, I hadn't wanted to touch it. Now, I wanted nothing more. I walked across the house slowly, not sneaking, just moving like I belonged, which, legally, I did. The laundry room was quiet. The dryer had stopped running. I opened the cabinet, reached for the folder. Inside, nothing had changed. The original deed, signed and notarized. My name first, his second. My signature, dated in ink I remembered buying from a small store in Salem, the kind of pen you don't throw away. I placed the folder on the counter and opened my phone. No hesitation, no rehearsal, just one photo. Clear, centered, complete. Then before I could second-guess myself, I emailed it to the same address I'd used the night before, my lawyer's private inbox. Subject? Reference. I didn't add a message. Didn't need one. I closed the folder and placed it exactly where I found it. Not because I was hiding anything, but because some steps should be quiet, not sneaky, just deliberate. Next, make space. I walked back to the guest room, packed a small tote bag with my essentials, wallet, keys, phone charger, my reading glasses, and a single change of clothes. I left the rest in the closet, hanging undisturbed. The suitcase stayed by the wall. The bed remained made. I didn't plan to run. I planned to move. With intention. With structure. I made myself a sandwich with the cold roast chicken in the fridge. Ate standing up, looking out the window at the street full of driveways and identical mailboxes. At noon, the door opened. Carla's voice carried in. Let's put her down for a nap before she explodes. They were back. I walked to the front hallway and met them just as Daniel was putting the baby's car seat down. Would you mind if I had a little time here on my own? I asked. Just for a day or two. You've been so generous. I thought I'd stay and enjoy the quiet after you go to that resort thing you mentioned. Carla looked at Daniel. He blinked. You mean while we're at the water park? It's just the weekend, Mom. Exactly, I said. I'll clean up after myself. Won't be any trouble. Carla gave a quick, rehearsed smile. Of course. That would be lovely. It's just, we hadn't planned to leave the baby with you. Oh, heavens, no, I said lightly. You'll all go. I'll have the house to myself. A little retreat. I could use the rest. Daniel nodded slowly. Well, sure. I mean, yeah, that works. I could feel him calculating. The baby monitor, the alarm system, the possibility of my doing something that might require explanation to Carla's parents later. But he smiled anyway. You deserve a break, he said. After all you've done for us. Funny. That was the first time he'd said anything close to that since I arrived. They left the next morning in a rush of bags and sunscreen and instructions about garbage days and thermostat settings. Carla kissed the baby 3 times before Daniel finally said, "Come on, we're going to miss the check-in window." I stood in the doorway, waving, holding the key fob like any trusted guest. Then I closed the door behind them, locked it, and leaned my back against the smooth white paint. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the sound of truth returning to the walls. I walked into the living room, sat in the armchair I hadn't dared to touch all week, kicked off my shoes and stretched my legs. This was not revenge. This was not an outburst. This was restoration. In the afternoon, I called a car service and arranged for a courier to deliver a copy of the deed to a law office 2 towns over. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't warn him. And I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. At sunset, I made myself tea. Real tea with leaves. I found a small ceramic mug pushed to the back of the cupboard, one with a crack near the handle, probably used once and set aside. It was perfect. I sat on the back patio as the sky turned gold and listened to the hum of sprinklers kicking on in unison down the street. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer. Tonight, I would enjoy the home I'd paid for. The one where, for once, I wasn't a guest. The sun rose without asking permission. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad and a pen I'd found in Carla's drawer. Monogrammed, of course. Outside, the hedges were being trimmed by a uniformed man with earbuds. A truck hummed on idle at the curb. Another day of curated peace. I made real coffee, not the capsules they used, but slow-dripped, dark and rich, like I'd always made it when I ran on less sleep and more necessity. At 9:01 a.m., I dialed the number. 3 rings, then the familiar voice of Helen Stafford, attorney at law. "Stafford and Patel?" "Helen," I said calmly. "It's Marianne Cross." She hesitated a beat. "Well, my goodness. It's been what? 3 years since we spoke? Still in Oregon?" "Actually," I said, "I'm in Connecticut, visiting family, temporarily." "And how can I help?" I glanced at the photo on the fridge, the only one with Daniel in it, cropped tightly between Carla and one of the stepkids. He wasn't smiling. "I'd like to initiate a reassessment of property control," I said, "regarding a home I co-own." "Go on." I laid it out simply. That I had funded the house, that I held majority equity, that Daniel's name was listed only for mortgage eligibility, and that I retained controlling interest. "You never transferred ownership?" she asked. "No." "And you have a copy of the deed?" "I sent it to your inbox last night," I replied. Subject line, reference. She paused. "Well, that simplifies things." She gave a little exhale, the kind lawyers do when they're trying not to sound impressed or judgmental. "What do you want, Marianne? Just tell me plainly." "I want the house legally reassigned under my sole name. I want full authority, unambiguous, final. I don't intend to sell it, but I do intend to make some changes." "Do you anticipate resistance?" I sipped my coffee. He doesn't know yet. But yes. Helen didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She'd met Daniel once, in a conference room years ago, during a matter involving his failed app idea and a loan he forgot he'd taken. She had sized him up in 10 minutes. "All right," she said. "You're still the majority deed holder, and we have leverage. I'll prepare a transfer declaration. Once you sign, we can initiate formal reassignment. If he challenges, it's a civil matter, but we'll win. You want it quiet?" "As quiet as dignity allows." "Understood. I'll email a draft this afternoon." We hung up. I sat in silence for a long while, staring at the open space of the living room. The expensive furniture, the curated color palette, the faint scent of lemon cleanser. None of it mattered. Not anymore. At noon, I opened Daniel's desk drawer. I wasn't snooping. I was securing what I'd earned. Inside, beneath a stack of architectural magazines, I found the spare set of keys. Garage, office, the fireproof box under the stairs. I used the garage key first, walked through, examining the details, boxes labeled Christmas, baby gear, old tech. One bin said, Mom, Misk. It was dusty. I opened it. Inside were a few framed photos of Daniel and me. One of us from his high school graduation, another from the small beach trip we'd taken when he was 9, the one he always said was the best day. A recipe card in my handwriting, a birthday card I'd sent 2 years ago, unopened. I closed the lid and left it on the workbench. Then I went to the fireproof box. Documents, insurance, medical files. A folder labeled Estate Carla. Her trust, her legacy plan. Not a mention of me. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself another coffee. I looked out at the backyard and thought about how many versions of myself had lived in Daniel's mind. There was the version who cooked and worked and bent herself into shapes that fit his needs. The version who signed checks. The version who stayed quiet. Now he would meet the one who remembered what she owned. That evening, Helen's draft arrived. Clean, precise. No unnecessary language. A quiet assertion of what was already mine. I signed digitally. Sent it back. A final message from Helen followed. Once filed, he'll receive formal notice. But if you'd rather tell him yourself, you have until Tuesday. I closed the laptop. Turned off the light. Let him have 2 more days of his illusion. Let him sip wine on the patio of some overpriced hotel, thinking he'd built a perfect life. Let him think his mother stayed in the background. I would wait. And then I would knock on the front door of the life he'd excluded me from, not as a guest, but as the owner. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. The day before they left for the water park, I found the right moment. We were in the kitchen. Carla was arranging little containers of snacks, gluten-free pretzels, carrot sticks, dried mango. Daniel was folding towels into a beach bag. Everything was moving fast, but their minds were already on vacation. I was thinking, I said casually, if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to stay here this weekend. You know, while you're away. Carla looked up, her hand hovering over a plastic container of sliced grapes. Oh, she said, trying to sound neutral. Just for some rest. The house is so peaceful without all the running around. I don't get quiet like this very often. Daniel glanced at Carla. She didn't speak. You mean stay in the house while we're gone? He asked. Yes, I said, folding my hands neatly on the counter. You're kind to let me stay this long. I wouldn't mind a bit of solitude before heading home. Carla cleared her throat. It's just, the alarm system, I won't touch it. I'll leave the back door lights on, water the plants if needed, and keep everything locked. No trouble at all. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. It's just, you know how it is, Mom. It's not personal. No, of course not, I said gently. It's never personal. That landed. He flinched slightly. Carla said, well, if it's just a couple of days and you're comfortable. I am, I nodded. And I'd feel better knowing someone's here, watching over things. We both know houses don't like being left alone. That's a phrase he'd heard before. My husband used to say it, years ago, about the cabin we rented one summer. Houses are like people. They get cold when forgotten. Daniel looked at me, and for a second, something shifted in his expression. Like he saw it. The past. The memory. But then it was gone. He reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out a ring of keys. Here, everything's labeled. Garage, back door, mailbox. I took them without ceremony, slipped them into my purse like they weighed nothing at all. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. Just not the way he thought. Carla went back to her snack containers. Daniel adjusted the strap on the diaper bag. I stood at the kitchen island and watched them pack the life they'd built. Efficient, detached, polished. They left the next morning before the sun was fully up. Carla double-checked the car seat, then triple-checked the fridge, then kissed the baby 3 times while Daniel carried suitcases to the trunk. I stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, holding my travel mug. "Text me if anything comes up," Daniel said. "Of course. And don't let the alarm beep too long when you unlock the door. It gets fussy." "I'll manage." Carla offered a tight smile. "Thanks again for staying. It's a relief, really." I smiled back. "Enjoy the water. You all deserve a break." Daniel leaned in and kissed my cheek. A formality. Then they were gone. Tail lights fading into the soft morning mist. I didn't wave. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. Walked through the house room by room, not inspecting, not claiming, just observing. It was a beautiful space, designed for other people's approval. In the guest bathroom, I found a drawer filled with small lotions and unopened toothpaste tubes, the kind you find in hotel bathrooms. I imagined Carla refilling it every few weeks, hoping no one ever opened it, but also hoping someone might, and be impressed. In the upstairs hallway, I noticed a faint scuff on the wall, likely from a stroller wheel. Carla would notice it next week and schedule a painter. The idea of her fussing over it made me smile. Downstairs, I opened the garage and retrieved the box labeled Mom Misk. I carried it into the kitchen and set it on the table. Opened it. Framed photos. A birthday card. A recipe card. Things they didn't throw out. That would have looked cruel, but couldn't bear to see either. I lined them up on the table, one by one. The photo of Daniel at 15, awkward and lanky, with his arm around me at the community center's award night. The one of us at the coast, a year after my husband died. Wind in our faces. A sandwich half-eaten in my hand. The recipe card for apple cake in my careful handwriting. I set them out like evidence in a quiet courtroom. Then I left them there and went into the study. Opened the laptop. Logged in with the password Daniel once showed me. Carla 1984. I opened a browser tab and went to the county's property portal. Typed in the address. Saw both names still listed. Marianne Cross, primary. Daniel Cross, secondary. Still true. Still legal. Still mine. I left the page open, the evidence clear. Then I sat back in his office chair and rested my hands in my lap. I had the house. I had the keys. And now I had time. They were gone. Not in the sense that they had disappeared. They would return eventually, as scheduled. But in that moment, they were fully gone. The echo of the garage door sliding shut behind their SUV felt like the final line in a chapter I hadn't written, but now claimed. I stood barefoot on the kitchen tiles, the key ring still warm in my palm. Outside, the morning light poured through the wide windows, filling the house with a kind of hollow brightness. No voices. No monitors blinking. No baby toys scattered across the floor. I had never heard this house quiet before, and now that I had, I realized how loud it had been. Not in sound, but in noise. Noise of pretending, of performance, of being tolerated. Now, it was just a structure. Wood, stone, glass. A thing without language or pretense. And it was mine. I went to the pantry and took out a proper mug. Not one of their dainty espresso things, but a big, chipped ceramic mug I'd noticed shoved in the back, clearly forgotten. I filled it with hot water and added a bag of strong black tea from my suitcase. Carla had all kinds of infused herbs and loose leaf blends, but none of them tasted like anything. Just vapor. Just fashion. I took the mug outside to the back patio. The chairs were white and too stiff, but the view was pleasant. A stretch of green lawn ending in tall hedges, beyond which sat another near-identical house, and another, and another. Identical boxes with different names. I sat, and for the first time in days, let my shoulders drop. It was strange how quickly comfort returned when performance left. For a while, I just listened. Not for any reason. Just because I could. A distant bird, the wind moving in neighbors' chimes, the soft tick of the cooling patio stones. I thought about Daniel, speeding down the freeway, music low, baby gurgling in the back seat. Carla would be checking the itinerary, asking where they'd stop for lunch. He'd nod, agree, do what he was told. That had always been Daniel's skill, adapting, blending into whatever shape his life required. It served him well in business. And it served him well in erasing me, but not completely. He hadn't asked me to sign away my part of the deed, hadn't thought to check if I'd done so. Maybe he'd assumed I had, that I'd forgotten, or let it slip. That was always his mistake. Thinking love was the same thing as surrender. It never was. Love gives, but it remembers. That evening, I cooked. Not a performance meal, not quinoa salad or hand-cut crudités, but real food. I found flour, butter, eggs, made biscuits from memory, roasted a chicken with thyme and lemon, made a salad with too much vinegar, the way I like it. I set the table for one. Used the good dishes, the ones Carla said were only for company. I suppose I counted for once. I poured a glass of red wine from a bottle they'd tucked in the back. The cheap one, not the wine she'd set aside for guests. That was fine. I never liked expensive wine anyway. It always tasted like effort. I ate slowly. No TV, no music. Just the sound of silverware on porcelain and my own breath, calm and steady. After dinner, I walked through the house again, room by room. In the baby's nursery, I sat in the rocking chair for a moment. It was brand new, barely used, the kind that made no noise. When Daniel was born, I had a wooden rocker that groaned every time I moved. He used to fall asleep to that rhythm. Groan, creak, rock, creak. I could hear it still. I looked at the books on the shelf. All new. None with folded corners. None with smudges from little hands. Just display. In the guest room, my room for now, I took out my suitcase and packed only the things I would need for 2 more days. The rest I placed in the closet neatly. There was no hurry. The deed transfer had been initiated. My lawyer would notify Daniel in due time. Until then, I wasn't moving. I wasn't hiding. I was simply home. I ended the night on the couch with a blanket and a crossword. The kind I used to do with my husband before he died. We'd sit together, taking turns, arguing over clues. It had been years since I'd done one out loud, but I found myself whispering as I wrote. 4 letters. To own, answer, hold. The pen felt good in my hand. The lights dimmed softly on their own. A timer, probably. But I stayed there a little longer, not asleep, just still. It was quiet. It was enough. The next morning, I dressed with purpose. Not in anything fancy, just slacks, a pressed shirt, and the shoes I wore to church back home. Polished, reliable, shoes for walking into rooms where decisions get made. I ate breakfast slowly. Toast, butter, 1 soft-boiled egg. I sat at the kitchen island and watched the light shift across the counter. The granite gleamed under the morning sun. Expensive, cold, and already mine. At 10 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to a woman in a dark blazer, tidy hair, and soft eyes behind wire-frame glasses. "Marianne Cross?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm Layla Ross. I'm here on behalf of Stafford and Patel." She stepped inside with quiet confidence, carrying a slim leather folder and a tablet. Her presence didn't disturb the house. She fit into the silence. We sat at the dining table. I'd cleared it of Carla's decorative candles and the unread copy of Architectural Digest that always sat open to a random page. Layla opened the folder. "This is a standard reassignment packet. We've pre-filled based on the deed and equity documents Ms. Stafford provided. You're listed as primary grantor and funding party. All we need now is the signature to initiate the filing." I nodded. She slid the tablet toward me. "Electronic is fastest. We'll handle delivery of the physical originals." I signed. Each page blinked softly as my name appeared. She watched without commentary, just quiet assurance. When I finished, she tapped a few buttons. "Done," she said. "As of today, legal title reassignment is in progress. You'll receive confirmation by Friday. A physical copy will be mailed to your address of choice." "I'll give you that before you go," I said. "I'm not staying here." She nodded. "Of course." She paused, then added, "For what it's worth, you're not the first mother I've met in this situation." I raised an eyebrow. "We handle a surprising number of quiet reversals," she said. "Mothers, aunts, grandparents, people who give everything and are later asked to disappear." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. "This is a summary packet. If you choose to speak directly with Mr. Cross, you'll have the updated ownership statement." I walked her to the door. She gave me a polite smile and stepped into the sunlight, vanishing like a ripple on calm water. Back inside, I sat at the table for a long time. The envelope still in my hand. The house was utterly still. No music, no calls, no movement. And then, like instinct, I rose and walked to the study. Opened Daniel's drawer, took out a pen, and wrote a note. "Daniel, you asked me not to tell the neighbors I was your mother. So I didn't. You asked me not to talk about the house. So I didn't. You didn't ask me to sign it away. So I didn't. You asked me to help you build a life. So I did. I won't take more than what's already mine. I won't ask for thanks. But I won't disappear. Love, Mom." I folded the note and placed it on his desk, under the framed certificate from Wharton. Then I placed the summary packet on top, angled neatly. The house didn't feel different. Not louder, not warmer. But I did. That afternoon, I opened the doors. All of them. The front. The back. The garage. Let air move through. I sat outside and watched the wind sweep the hedges, listened to the creak of the wooden gate, the low hum of life returning. The neighbors wouldn't notice anything had changed, but everything had. Tomorrow, I'd start packing my things, not to flee, just to move forward. But tonight, I would sleep in the master bedroom. I had the keys. I had the name. I had earned it. The filing was processed at 9:43 a.m. on a Wednesday. I received the notification in my inbox. Plain, clinical, efficient. A scanned copy of the reassigned title deed, my name listed singularly under legal owner. No fanfare, no calls, just one sentence from Helen in the body of the email. It's done. I sat at the kitchen table with the screen open before me, letting the words settle. Not in triumph, not in anger, just in balance. Outside, a gardener trimmed hedges with a small electric blade, methodical and precise. Inside, the silence was complete. I boiled water, made tea, took the mug out to the patio, and sat in the same chair I'd occupied every morning that week. The house stood behind me like a shell I'd cracked open and stepped inside. Later, I went back inside and opened the envelope Layla had left, the physical copy of the same document. Heavy paper, embossed seal, the kind of document that made things real to other people. I placed it in a folder, slipped it into my suitcase, and then I cleaned. Not the way Carla did, not dusting already polished surfaces or realigning throw pillows by color, but cleaning with purpose. I washed the guest sheets, wiped down the kitchen counters, folded the laundry they'd left tumbling in the dryer. I did it not because they would return, but because I was leaving. Yes, I was leaving. Not because I was afraid. Far from it. But because I'd done what needed to be done. I had turned the page. I didn't need to live in this house to prove it was mine. I just needed to know it. At noon, I sat in the study. I reread the note I'd left Daniel, still neatly tucked under his framed degree, still exactly as I'd written it. No edits, no flourishes. There was nothing else to say. At 2:00, I called a car service, reserved a ride for the next morning, early, before they would return, before explanations became theater. The house remained still, unaware, unchanged. And yet, I felt it. The shift, the quiet restoration of weight back to the right hands. That evening, I made one last meal. A simple stew, beef, carrots, potatoes, onions, the way Daniel liked it when he was a child. I ate it at the table alone. No music, no distractions, just memory and hunger and peace. Afterward, I packed my bag, took only what I came with, left the note, left the folder with the deed, left the photo of us at the beach, the one they'd stored in the garage bin, now framed and placed gently on the hallway console where everyone would see it. At midnight, I stood at the front door with the lights off, looked through the glass at the quiet street. The Thorne residence, the little plaque still read. I didn't need to change it. Let the neighbors keep their illusions. Let Daniel keep his. But when he opened that folder the next morning, when he saw my name, alone, undeniable, he would understand. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't revenge. It was just the return of what had always been mine, and it no longer needed his permission. They returned on a Sunday. Carla stepped through the door first, her voice already elevated from the baby's whimpering in the car. "Can you get the diaper bag? And the cooler? It's got the breast milk." Daniel followed, keys still in hand, dragging a suitcase behind him. The wheels thudded softly against the entry tiles. He called out, "Mom, we're back." No answer. Carla frowned. Maybe she's still asleep. Daniel checked the guest room. Empty. Bed made. Pillows arranged the way she'd found them. Guest towels folded on the bench at the foot of the bed. He opened the closet. Empty hangers. In the kitchen, Carla placed the cooler on the counter and glanced around. "She didn't text or leave a note?" "I don't know," Daniel muttered, pulling out his phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. He turned toward the hallway and noticed the change first. Subtle, but unmistakable. The framed photo on the console. Him and his mother at the beach. The wind lifting his hair, her hand resting gently on his back. He froze. "Carla," he said, "come here." She appeared behind him. "What?" He pointed to the photo. "That wasn't there before." She studied it. "Did she put that out?" He didn't answer. He walked down the hallway, heart thudding now. Something was off. Not wrong, just arranged. In the office, he found it. The note, sitting on his desk, folded, tidy, underneath his framed degree. He read it in silence. Carla stood in the doorway. "What is it?" Daniel didn't look up. He picked up the second sheet, the summary packet. The deed, reassigned. His name, gone. Only hers. Carla stepped forward, saw the heading. "Wait, what the hell is this?" Daniel sat down heavily in the chair. The house around him felt suddenly different. Smaller. Not colder, not yet, but altered. Like the ground had shifted a fraction of an inch beneath the floorboards. "She never signed it over," he said softly. "What?" "She never signed away her share. She was always the owner." Carla reached for the papers, scanned them. "No, that's not. This can't be legal." "It is. She said it was just temporary." "She never said that," he snapped. "I did. I told you it was temporary." Carla's mouth opened, then closed. "She paid for it," he said. "The down payment, the equity. She signed the mortgage to get it through underwriting." "And now what?" Carla asked, voice rising. "She just takes it back?" He shook his head. "She's not taking anything. She's reminding us." They stood there in silence, the baby monitor clicking to life somewhere upstairs. A quiet wail, distant. Carla turned, stormed toward the staircase. "You better fix this," she said over her shoulder. Daniel sat in the office for a long time, note in hand. He read it again and again. He tried to be angry, tried to feel betrayed, but instead, he felt something else. The memory of his mother's hand on his back at that beach. The sound of her voice telling bedtime stories. The warmth of a bowl of stew waiting after a hard day. She hadn't shouted, hadn't stormed, hadn't begged. She had simply reminded him of the truth. He folded the note slowly, held it in his lap. Then he picked up the phone. But he didn't dial. Not yet. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Not for lack of trying. He lay in bed beside Carla, who had turned away from him with a forceful finality, her breathing measured, controlled. The baby monitor hissed softly from the nightstand, but the house, his house, was still. Or maybe it wasn't his. That was the problem now, wasn't it? The paper didn't lie. Her name sat alone at the top of the deed, in thick, clean font. The seal was embossed, filed, certified. The folder had weight, the kind that made everything else feel suddenly flimsy. He sat up around 2 a.m., careful not to wake the baby. Went downstairs. The hallway light was still on. He passed the photo on the console again, and this time, he stopped. It had been taken with a disposable camera. He remembered the feel of the sand on his feet, the squint of the sun. He couldn't have been more than 10. She wore a hoodie, not a proper beach outfit. She'd thrown it on over her scrubs after a shift. And still, she'd smiled. He'd forgotten that day. Not the event, but the feeling. In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the sink. She had stayed here, alone, for 2 days. Cooked, cleaned, sat on the back patio probably listening to the birds, watching the hedges sway. She hadn't rearranged anything. She hadn't touched Carla's vases or the baby's toys. But somehow, her presence was everywhere. Not loud, not chaotic, just undeniable. Daniel walked into the office again and opened the folder for the 3rd time. His name wasn't on it, not even in the footnotes. He tried to remember the moment he decided to leave her off. Not legally. He hadn't removed her. He just let it fade. Let the lie grow in convenience. Told Carla it was temporary. Told himself it was cleaner that way. He'd had the down payment, hadn't he? Didn't that count? Except he hadn't. Not really. He'd called her late at night, voice low so Carla wouldn't hear. "It's just for now," he'd said. "Just to get it through escrow." She'd said yes before he finished the sentence, like she always did. Now she had reminded him what that yes had bought, and he couldn't argue with it. He couldn't even resent her, because deep down, beneath the polished life he'd built, the curated introductions, the Aunt Marianne, and the silence, he knew he hadn't earned any of it alone. He wanted to call her, say something, apologize maybe. But what could he say? "Sorry I asked you to shrink so I could grow? Sorry I borrowed your strength, then painted over it?" At 3 a.m., he went outside. The lawn was damp, the air thick with dew. The Thorne residence plaque caught the porch light and gleamed faintly. He crouched in front of it, ran his thumb across the letters. She hadn't taken it down. That, somehow, broke him, a little. He sat on the step and stayed there until the sky began to shift from black to navy, and the birds started their tentative morning songs. He wasn't sure what kind of man that made him, but he knew what kind of woman she was. And now, finally, so did everyone else. I didn't go back to the house, not because I was afraid or unwelcome, but because it wasn't about the house anymore. I'd made my point. I'd reminded him. And now I had something else to do. Something final. A week after the filing, I sat in a small office in Salem, Oregon, the same place where I'd signed the original wire transfer 2 years ago, the same notary, the same pen. But this time, I wasn't signing for anyone else. "Name of the beneficiary?" the notary asked gently. I smiled. "Her name is Emily. She's 6. He paused. "A granddaughter?" I nodded. "She won't be able to manage the property until she's—" "I know," I interrupted. "It'll go into a trust. Full transfer on her 25th birthday, or earlier with court petition." He filled out the rest. When I left, I had nothing in my hands, just a digital receipt. No need for ceremony. I took the bus home. 3 days later, Daniel called. I let it ring once before answering. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was quiet, hesitant. "I got the documents," he added. "The full reassignment. It's real." "Yes," I said. There was a long silence. Then, "You could have, I don't know, talked to me first." "I tried," I said. "Years ago." He exhaled. "I didn't think you'd really do it." "I didn't think I had to," I replied. "Until I did." He didn't argue. I could hear the sounds of the house in the background. A baby's soft gurgle, a microwave beeping, a dog barking outside. Then his voice again, softer. "You left the photo out." "Yes." "And the note?" "I did." He paused again. "Thank you for not embarrassing me." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Oh, Daniel, I didn't do this to embarrass you. I did it to remind you." A quiet beat. "Emily's in school now," he said suddenly. "First grade, top of her reading group." "I know," I said. "She sent me a drawing." He was quiet. Then, with visible effort, he asked, "What happens to the house now?" I let the pause linger before answering. "It goes into a trust," I said. "For Emily. I've signed it over. She'll inherit it when she's old enough." Another silence. Longer this time. That's fair," he said finally. "I mean, it's more than fair." "Yes," I said. "It is." We didn't say much after that. Later that week, I received a package. No note, just a small photo frame. The same one from the hallway console. Us at the beach. I placed it on the shelf near my front window, next to the one of my husband in his uniform, next to the ceramic handprint Emily had made in preschool. A few weeks later, Emily called. "Grandma?" she asked. "Yes, love?" "Daddy says you gave me a house." I laughed. "Not yet. But one day, if you want it. She was quiet, thinking, will it still have the big bathtub? If your parents don't change it, yes. Can I paint my room pink? You can paint it anything you want. She giggled. Then, seriously, will you live there with me? No, sweetheart, I said gently, but I'll be nearby. Promise? I promise. She paused. You're not mad at Daddy anymore? No, I said, and I meant it. Not anymore. Because it wasn't about anger. It never had been. It was about memory, about dignity, about putting my name back where it belonged, and making sure the next generation knew where things came from. So that one day, when Emily walked through those doors, she'd know the truth. Not just about the house, but about the woman who made sure it still stood. The days grew quieter after that, not emptier, just quieter, like a room after a good conversation when everything important has already been said. I tended to my little garden again, took walks to the post office, baked more often, sent letters. Emily wrote back sometimes, in crooked, bold letters with drawings in the margins. Once she sent me a picture of the house, drawn in pink crayon, with stick figures outside. She labeled them. "This is me," she wrote over the girl in the window. "This is my house." And then below it, in smaller print, "Grandma's house too." I kept it on my fridge. Daniel didn't visit, but he called. On birthdays, on holidays, sometimes just to check in. He never mentioned the deed again. Neither did I. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about not vanishing. Carla never called. That was fine. We'd both said enough. And the house, that big, careful house, stood where it always had. A little quieter now, maybe. A little more honest. Daniel stopped calling it the Thorne Residence. The plaque disappeared from the lawn one day. No announcement. Just gone. I was told Emily asked about it, and Daniel said, "We don't need it anymore." I liked that. One spring afternoon, I sat on my porch with a blanket over my knees and watched the wind carry petals down the sidewalk. The sun was warm, not harsh, not demanding, just there, like I was. And if someone were to ask what happened, how a mother could fly across the country and leave with more than she arrived with, I'd tell them this. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes love has teeth. Sometimes the quietest woman in the room owns the floorboards under everyone's feet. And sometimes the house does remember who built it. If this story stayed with you, share it. Let someone who forgot their worth remember it again. Let someone quiet know they still have a voice.